G'day all, how are you? I'm just going to do a brake fluid flush on my Mitsubishi Outlander. Now, what I'm doing here is basically the same procedure for pretty much any vehicle on the market. There is a few little minor differences here and there. Mainly if you've got drum brakes, there may be some slight different locations of brake bleed nipples. That's about it really. But essentially the procedures are the same. Now I'll show you the way I do it. You may have a different method. I'll show you a couple of different, I'll explain a couple of different methods as well, and some little tricks that I use when doing my particular method. So let's get into it. Now first things first, you want to locate your brake master cylinder. Now if you're a left-hand drive car, obviously it's going to be on the other side, but here in Australia, right-hand drive car, it'll always be where your brake booster master is, which will be above the driver's position. So I always start off by sucking the old fluid out of the reservoir and discarding that and then refilling. It's just, you don't have to cycle all this stuff through the system then. So some of them may have a little filter in there, which will obviously impinge the process of throwing a syringe in there to suck it out. We'll see how this one goes. I haven't actually done this one before, but it's the design of the design of that reservoir is not really the most friendly. Now, you don't want to spill any brake fluid all over your paintwork because the stuff it doesn't play nice with paintwork. So wash it off with water pretty much straight away if you do spill any. Right, so now that we've sucked out as much as we can, this is a pretty average design. You can't really get a tube in properly. We want to just top this up. Now, during this whole procedure, we don't want to let this fluid drop down too much because it'll introduce air to the system. So during this whole bleeding, flushing procedure, we're going to be basically minimising the chance of any air getting in. Now, I guess it goes without saying while I'm trying to get this lid off, if you have any doubts about your abilities to do this, then this is your brake system. So either seek professional advice or look up a mate who knows what they're doing. Now obviously, now that we've drained this out, we'll top this back up again. Now I'm using a brand new bottle of brake fluid. It's always important to do that when doing your brakes. Because brake fluid is hydroscopic, which means it will absorb water, which is pretty much one of the reasons why we're doing this. I do it on a regular basis every 2 years because it absorbs water, which creates rust in the system, and you don't want that. During this whole procedure, we want to make sure we've got fluid in here. So basically, we need to be regularly checking it or have a second person checking it for us. I'm just going to put the cap back on there for the time being. Now for me, I would normally work from the furthest point away from the master cylinder. So for this right-hand drive vehicle, it's going to be the rear left caliper. So we'll do that one, and we'll do the right rear, and we'll do the left front, and then the right front. Obviously left-hand drive vehicles, opposite around, but yeah, furthest point away from the master cylinder, and work your way towards the closest. And at the calipers, you're looking for the bleed nipple. Now, these are generally towards the top of your calipers. They'll have a cover, and you're just going to pull that off, and you need a tube on that. Now, if you have drum brakes, you'll probably find your nipple is on the inside of your brake drum, and it'll definitely be at the top as well. It's just the way they work. Obviously, air rises to the top, so brake nipples will always be at the top. You'll find these pretty much on the inside because the master cylinder is normally at the top of your brake caliper, or not brake caliper, in your brake drum. But don't worry if it's drum brake or disc brake, because essentially the process is still the same, so it won't make a difference to you either way. So as far as I am aware, there's 3 different methods you can use to bleed your brakes. So number 1 is a pressure bleeder that basically sits on your master cylinder, all hooks up onto it. It applies a light pressure, obviously not too much because you blow your bloody reservoir apart because they're only plastic. This is sort of more high-end workshop sort of grade stuff. That's real easy because then all you need to do is just go around to each corner, crack your bleed nipple, and obviously the whole system's pressurised, so it just forces the fluid through. You leave that bleed nipple open until you got your new clear fluid run through, close it, job done. Repeat that on each corner. The other method, normally need 2 people, so you'll have one person in the driver's seat, get them to press and hold on the brake pedal. And so while that person's at the brake pedal, set yourself up, get a hose on your brake line to a container of some sort. You'll see why they've got another hose on this in a sec. But basically, get them to press and hold on the brake pedal. While they're holding, crack the brake nipple, let the fluid drain out. Now their foot will go to the floor, obviously, as it forces fluid through. Shut that brake nipple off and they can release it. If they take their foot off the brake pedal, you could risk sucking some air back into that caliper, which isn't ideal. Get them to pump it up again. Once they've got pressure on, again, crack it and release any fluid. Shut it off, release the brake pressure. Basically repeat that until you get your clear fluid come through. Now, a real handy tip as well, if you've got somebody on the brake pedal doing your pressure. Now, this doesn't really apply to a new car so much, but definitely for an older car, probably avoid having the person push the brake pedal all the way to the floor when you crack that bleed nipple. What can happen is the master cylinder wears itself in basically in a section that's normal stroke, and what I've had happen before is if you're bleeding the system and you let that pedal go past that main wear section, you can damage the seals in the master cylinder, which will then lead to basically, well, in my case, when that happened is when you put pressure on your brake pedal, it'll basically just slowly, it'll pressure up and then it'll just sink to the floor as the fluid's leaking past the internal seals in that master cylinder. So yeah, I'd probably try and just get them to basically give it a small stroke and not let it go to the floor. That can really save you a lot of grief later on. Trust me, it's not much fun when you go, crap, more work to do. The other method that I'm using is a vacuum bleeder. So these are real handy if you're just by yourself. Just hook that hose up, crack the bleed, pump it up till you're drawing a vacuum, and it'll basically just suck the fluid out. Now you'll see, I don't know whether you'll see it very well, but it will always show some bubbles coming through. What I do, well, my theory is it sucks a lot of air through the thread. So like I mentioned, when pulling a vacuum, these things can suck some air. So a trick I like to do, just undo your nipple, take the whole lot out. Now these things, they're just basically a taper with a hole in the end of it. The fluid will go out through here and then out through the middle. So basically what will happen if you pull on a vacuum, you'll suck air through this thread. So a simple thing you could do is either put some thread tape on it, or what I do, just put a little bit of grease on that thread. You won't get any grease or anything into your brake caliper because that's all the brake piston is all on this side. So you'll be fine there. It just helps with the process of sucking a vacuum through. Obviously this makes a little bit of a mess with the brake fluid, just dribbles out by gravity, but a bit of brake clean and some rags will sort that out. So you can see how much air bubbles, I'll go this way so you get the shadow, you can see how many air bubbles that still sucks through. I'll do the next one without greasing it and show you the difference, but don't be alarmed, this isn't air through the system, it's generally just air getting sucked in through your bleed. As you can see, this one has no grease on the threads. Look, this vehicle is not too much different. Some vehicles are really bad. I've just had them suck a lot of air and it's really hard to bleed any fluid out. So if you're having issues with lots of air sucking in, definitely throw some grease on those threads. It can't hurt. and it can only make your job a bit easier. You'll need about 1 litre of brake fluid to flush everything out properly. You'll use the most fluid on obviously the position that's furthest away from the master cylinder. Each successive one, it'll take less and less to get fresh fluid out. Now, if you can find something that's a different colour to the existing brake fluid, it makes your job a hell of a lot easier, but generally most of them that I've come across are just that amber sort of colour, so they look like beer. So it doesn't taste like it though, I can guarantee you that. But yeah, so that makes your job a little bit more difficult. Unless it's really particularly manky and dirty, then you can tell when that fresh stuff comes out. So in regards to colour change, you can see how this initial fluid I'm sucking out of the caliper is quite dark. And hopefully the colour shows up a bit better on camera there, but definitely this is a lot lighter than that last lot. Well, it's definitely lighter in person. Like I said, whether it shows up on camera or not, who knows? Now, if you have a manual transmission, I'd also recommend doing your clutch if it's a hydraulic clutch actuator. Some might be a cable or a linkage, whatever. But yeah, I'd do that at the same time as well. It's just nice and convenient. And vehicles like this, they share the same fluid reservoir for the clutch and the brake system, so it kind of makes sense just to bleed that through as well. So look, this has been kind of a bit of a, probably not so in-depth, but it's a pretty good overview of what you need to do. Bleeding and flushing your brakes is not rocket science. If you follow the procedures well, you shouldn't have a problem. If you get a spongy brake pedal afterwards, it means that you've got some air in the system. Probably a good way to check if it's spongy as well is before you start work, turn your car off, pump your brake pedal a couple of times, get the vacuum out of the booster, and that way you'll feel what the pedal feels like with no boost assistance, so it's basically all you. Now, once you finish your flush and you bleed, go back to your brake pedal, stand on it again. If it feels nice and firm with no sponginess, then you should be good to go. If it feels spongy, like you're pushing on a spring, it's a good chance you've got air in the system, so go back, bleed again until you get that pedal feeling right. Because once you start up and you've got that vacuum assistance from the engine, it really can hide a lot, because that'll put a lot of extra bay effort into the brake system that you're not actually putting in yourself. Good luck with your brake bleeding. Got any questions, comments, anything extra you want to add, throw it in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, all that. Go to the shop in the description below, buy yourself a cap, and shout out to the members, Byron. So thanks guys. If you want to be a member, get early access, do what Byron's done, and hit that join button. It's a real low monthly fee, and you get early access, blooper reels, extra content, all that sort of stuff. So until next time, see you later.